I'm just finishing putting in the floor beam that goes over the mast step and getting this all reassembled in preparation for the floorboards. Earlier this week, I had put a final coat of topside paint on the inside of the boat. And in preparation for that, I sanded the existing coat with 120 grit sandpaper, and then I vacuumed it out really well. Once I got it all vacuumed out, I then took some paint thinner on a rag and went over to pick up any residual little dust. I'm using TotalBoat's Wet Edge as my topside paint, and you can see it's a 1-part polyurethane mix. And the color that I've chosen is oyster white. I'm going to be thinning the paint down so that it'll increase the flow of it a little bit. And it says here on the can that it can be thinned 5 to 10% with TotalBoat's Special Brushing Thinner 100. So I'm going to do that, and what is handy are these TotalBoat cups. I really like these TotalBoat mixing cups. It really is very handy when you're mixing proportions of paint and thinner. They have on here markings, of course, in ounces and in milliliters, but they have all of these markings across here for different proportions that you might need in your mix. So a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and so forth, all the way up to even a 6-to-1. So how that works is like for a 1-to-1, if you were to fill up here with, say, your paint, and then you finish the fill up to here with paint thinner, you'd have a 1-to-1 mix, or 50%. So the one that we're interested in here is the 3-to-1, 5%, 10%. So how that works is with the 3-to-1, if you were to fill this up with paint to here and then fill the rest up to here with paint thinner, you'd have a 3-to-1 mix, or a 33%. So what we're going to do is to fill the paint up to here and then fill it up to here at the 10% mark with paint thinner. So since I'm going to make a fairly large amount, I'm going to mix 5 of paint and then 5, fill the rest of it up with paint thinner up to here. So a lot of people have been asking me why I painted the inside of the boat, commenting that they thought that the cedar was so beautiful. Well, partially the reason would be is that in the art world, it's what we call negative space. And negative space is sort of that quiet part in a painting or in a sculpture, so that the hero of the piece of artwork can shine. Now, in reference to the boat, the hero here will be all of that walnut bright work. So by painting the inside and having all of these multiple different types of wood being in competition, this way that walnut can really shine against this sort of neutral background. Now, a more practical side of it is, if I had varnished all of that, it would require a lot of maintenance. So I'd rather be sailing than sanding and varnishing. And by painting the inside of the hull, it certainly makes that maintenance part much more manageable. So there you have it. Those are basically my reasons for painting the inside of the hull. Now that I've got the inside all painted and finishing up this floor timber here, you can also see that I added some cleats here to the bulkhead so that when the floorboards come in here, they have a place to land. So that's what we'll be doing on this episode of The Art of Boat Building, is putting in the floorboards. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we can see that there needs to be 7 boards from the centerboard trunk over to the widest part of the boat. Now I've measured the widest part of the boat, and it comes out to be 19 3/4 inches. Now it also calls here for the floorboards to be 1/2 inch by 3 inches, cedar spaced 3/16 of an inch apart. So one of the things that I want to point out to you in the plans is they don't always jive with what reality is. And I'll show you what I mean. Now if we look here at what these boards actually scale out to be, they are far shorter than 3 inches. So you can see here's the 3-inch mark, and the actual board looks like it's more like 2.5 inches. So if we were to add up it up as 3 inches with the 3/16 inch spacing, it would come out to almost 22 3/8 inches. So what we need to do is to determine what width those boards are going to be actually made. So now remember, these plans were drawn in 1985, and they were drawn before any boat had ever been built. So there's many things that the plans show that aren't necessarily what the reality is, and is certainly open to the builder's interpretation. Now another example of that some of you saw last week was this detail of the chain plate, that the oak showed this tiny little nib on there. Now all of the havens that I've seen and the herreshoffs, they do not have that. So it certainly was some little detail that Joel White added that in reality is not needed. So I ran some calculations. So if I start off by making the boards 2 5/8 inches wide, and then I add 3/16 for the spacer, then that gives me 2 13/16. So we multiply that by 7, and we will end up with 19 11/16. So you can see that is just shy of the 19 3/4 that we need to make up that space. So now when we look down here at the plan view, we can see that these are the floorboards laid out and that there are 7 of them. And then we can see this sweep right here is where they end, and they actually hit the hull. Now this board here, this is a drawing of actually the seat. So these actually go down underneath here like that. So this board here that covers that is called a margin board. And we can see it up here is the margin board is a 1/2 inch cedar also. So I've been thinking about how I want those floorboards to look. And you can see in these photographs that I took out at the Wooden Boat School of a haven that they are all painted the same color as the inside of the hull, which I think is just a little bit boring. So what I thought about doing was to get some teak perhaps and make the boards out of teak. So I priced out teak, and it is available to me at my hardwood store. But then I got thinking about it, is like really what I'm looking for is a rot resistant wood, and that I have lots and lots of walnut. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mill down some of that walnut stock that I have to that 1/2 inch thickness and use that for the floorboards and the margin board. So the first step is to get those boards milled out. Well, now that I've got all of the walnut floorboards milled out, I have them all cut at 2 5/8 by 1/2 inch. And the plans, I kind of calculated I need just around 100 linear feet of boards. And what I have stacked here is about 115 linear feet. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to start right in the center by the centerboard trunk. And I'm going to start at the aft end, and then I'm going to work port to starboard so that I'll keep all of those evenly spaced. I've got my first piece cut here to the proper length. It'll go in there like that. And you'll notice that I added a little oak cleat here in order for this floorboard to land on. So I'm going to put that in there, and I've got a little bit of space on each end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just some number 6 1/4" drywall screws to tack it down temporarily. Now the finished one will have number 8 1-inch bronze screws that have an oval head, so they'll have a little bit nicer finish. So I'm basically going to put 2 holes in here just to hold it, because I'm going to be taking them all out in order to get a protective finish on the back side. Now that I've got that down, I'm going to go through and drill and countersink all of the other holes so that I'll have that all finished up. You notice that I didn't put holes here, and the reason being is these boards will not need 2 screws all the way down. It'll only need them every other frame. So the next board will go in here next to this one, and it'll come all the way down here to frame 15. Now there's a hatchway here that you can see here in the plans that are 2 boards wide, and that hatchway is on both the port and starboard side, and that is so that you have access into the bilge so that there's water in there, you can pump it out. So I'll get these up to that point, 2 boards over on each side, and then we'll make that hatchway. Now that I've got all of the floorboards in here, I need to trim off the edges, and I'm doing that with, you can see I've sprung a batten board across here to get a nice fair curve on the outer edge there. Now you may have noticed when I was putting the boards in that I let them run a little wild, so there has kind of this scallop edge going on there, and that was so that I'd have enough material in order to draw that line. So what I'm going to do now that I've got that fair curve in there is I'm going to take a white pencil and I'm going to mark that out. And I'm using a white pencil because a regular pencil against walnut is just really hard to see. All right, so now that I've got that all marked out, I will do that also over here on the port side, and then I'll take up those boards and trim them off, and then we'll be ready to start shaping for those margin boards. I've got all of the boards all cut out now, and we can get started thinking about those margin boards. But that's going to have to wait until next episode because we're running out of time this week. But I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the new patrons that have joined the crew. I really appreciate your support. And as always, thanks for watching and thanks for supporting the Art of Boat Building.